We're all set.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's school board meeting. Would you all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We had a posted agenda, but we're going to change it up a little bit after talking with Ruth Ellen. We're going to move directly to old business of reopening the discussion and decision. I know staff, and all the staff, administrators, the teachers, principals put a lot of work into this, and I do want to say I do appreciate all their efforts. I'm going to open up with what I feel is my thoughts on my approach, and I want to poll the board what their feelings are, and then open it up to the general public for their comments. But again, I'd like to thank everyone for their staff and staff for their work on the multiple different options, the phased approach 1 through 5. Even though from the last meeting you would have got the impression that I was ready to push to go to phase 3 or phase 4. I'm concerned with being ready with all the infrastructure changes or screening or protections that we need to have in place. So my thoughts, based upon everything that's been presented, is to do online learning for a minimum of 6 weeks, and at the 4-week mark, being able to notice all the parents and residents that we would be ready and able to open up in another 2 weeks. That gives us an opportunity through the next 4 weeks, plus an additional 4 weeks, to have the school as ready as possible for either a phased approach with restrictions or a full-in with restrictions. And I think things will shake out in the next 4, hopefully 8 weeks, where we would have a decision on what that opening would be. I think making that decision now would be premature based upon changes in the community, whether it's infection rate up or down, things that are available to treat any infections, and also guidelines that may be improving and support from the state. So those are my thoughts on what as far as I think is the best approach. But I'll open up to the rest of the board. So Tim?
So if I get your thought process correct, we're going to let the public know, let the staff know that for the first 6 weeks, we plan on being in a remote atmosphere, and over the next 4 weeks, or before we open, we're going to define what that actually looks like, correct?
Yes.
Okay. My other question or thought process out there, just so people don't panic, is will part of that process or discussion on remote include some of our special ed kids or some of our kids that are really having a hard time in a very limited quantity, allowing the admin to make decisions to possibly bring a very limited number of people into our buildings?
I would support that. I think it's going to be necessary in some cases. We have to ensure the best education for every student, and some have needs that may require to be here with staff that they need to have access to.
So I guess in putting that out on the floor, the only reason I'm putting that out now is I've heard those comments from parents. So I'm not saying we're definitely going to do it, but that next 4 weeks of our time planning on what this remote looks like, I'd like that to be part of the conversation and not catch Diana by surprise. She may say we don't want to do this.
Right.
But I want to put that out there, that we're not saying everybody is concrete remote. We have that opportunity in the discussions over the next couple of weeks to have some flexibility. But
Diana, you want to jump in?
Okay.
Go ahead.
And I'm not going to say that we don't want to bring kids in, because honestly, I do want to. Based on the governor's executive order, we are required to have meetings regarding special education students. I apologize, that's my phone that I did not mute. And therefore, that's going to be part of our conversation. I've also begun to look at kind of a triage for those students that might be 504 students, those students that are special education students, those students are experiencing emotional dysregulation. Here are the things that we're going to look at in terms of where can we gather the evidence. Here are some things we can do in terms of interventions. That's something I can share out with everyone. And that's the letter that people have been confused by,
right,
who have been calling me and saying, what does this mean? What it really means is we're going to meet about every one of your children who have special education needs. We are inviting you to join that meeting. And by all means, if you have specific opinions about whether your child should be in this physical building, we're going to make you sign a lot of things, but that's certainly something we can look at.
And I think, and this wouldn't be potentially on your shoulders, Diana, but I think the other thing that we have to look at is if we have an AB student and all of a sudden we saw during remote that they become a D or an F student, we need to look at that and decide what our coaches, what our coaching needs to be, and do we need to bring that type of student in as well. It's not necessarily special ed, but isn't necessarily the best independent worker.
We have a list.
Okay. So at this point, I thank you, Diana. I would like to hear from the other members of the board. Stan, your thoughts?
Yes, thank you. I don't think we should be in the building at all. I like the fact that there are phases, and I think we should make a plan that goes from phase 1, fully remote, to phase 5. And rather than setting time limits because we don't know what's going to happen in 6 weeks or 8 weeks, so a time frame is not a good benchmark. But I do think we should have benchmarks if we're going between phase 1 and phase 2, so that if we start fully remote, clearly it's the safest option. It speaks volumes to the fact that from phase 1 to phase 4, you can have remote by choice, but you can't have in-person by choice. So that tells me right there that in-person is not safe and remote is safe, because the choice that everybody can have is to be remote regardless of which phase you have. And you can't be in person regardless of which phase you have. So I'm for a gradual change. And if we never get a benchmark that moves us from phase 1 to phase 2, then so be it. We currently have between 1 and 4 cases in Farmington. And there's no reason to say that that won't increase. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 8 weeks or the next semester. So we should really plan on being as safe as possible, going fully remote, and then hoping that we have a benchmark that can move us to phase 2. There's just no cases in Farmington. The truth is, we have no control over whether or not those kids will wear masks, whether or not they'll touch each other, whether or not they'll wash their hands when they go to the bathroom. We can't be omniscient narrators of this story. We can't know what they're going to do and how they're going to react when they see their friends for the first time in a classroom. Nor do we have any control over what the kid does when they go home and what kind of interactions they have with their parents, with other people, and whether they go to the beach on Sunday and don't have any masks or anything like that. We don't have any control, but our responsibility is for those children. So we have to be as safe as possible, only consider the children. So I'm all for a phased approach, starting with fully remote, to protect the kids, protect our staff, protect everybody in town, basically. Because as we all know, schools are breeding grounds for diseases. This isn't one you can laugh at. This is serious. Those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Josh?
Yeah, I'm in favor of a full reopening in conjunction with any and all measures to counter the spread of the virus.
Well, let me ask you the thoughts. What's your opinion regarding being closed for 6 weeks while we're trying to get ready for some type of opening, not making any commitment to what that would look like? Because still, I think with a phased approach, we have logistics that we have not conquered yet. At least I'm not comfortable with.
To give us time, certainly to give us time to implement those measures is fine, but I'm in favor of the full reopening.
Okay, thank you. Has Joel been able to log on yet?
I don't see him.
Okay. So at this point, I'm gonna. What's that?
Is Mr. Shagnon on with us?
No, I haven't seen him. I'm looking.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to open it up to comments from any members in the public or staff that wants to give us their thoughts or concerns. I know we have some people here. And I'd like to hear from people. I know we have a call-in number. It is listed on the it's listed on the Google Meet and on the TV. It is 1-513-816-0430 with a PIN number of 402732. 182
Mark.
followed by the pound sign.
Yes. You need all 9 numbers or you don't get in.
I'd never make it. At this point, would anybody like to come up to the mic and give us your opinion or concerns?
If I keep this down to...
Yeah.
I'm Laurel Vachon. I'm the president of the Farmington Teachers Association. Last evening, the Farmington Teachers Association and the educational support professionals met and collectively came up with our terms of employment to return for the 2020-2021 school year. We presented the school board and the superintendent with a memorandum of agreement, which is basically a long list of safety guidelines.
Oh, you can now.
Is that Joel?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've been on the call and I have been trying to interject some thoughts and no one, I guess, could hear me. I apologize.
Okay, we hear you now.
Thanks, Joel.
Sorry. I guess one of my questions was when Mr. Brown brought up some of the concerns about being able, special ed students being able to access services through the option 2. Is it option 2? I don't have it in front of me. Mr. Netto, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Is this an option, and I just want to be clear on this for parents that are listening, is the option to reach out and get some services on campus only students that are identified?
No, and I apologize. We were discussing that with Mr. Brown and Mr. King and Mrs. Vaughn as well. That certainly we will keep an eye on other students that are demonstrating a struggle with remote learning.
Okay, so if a parent reaches out and says, look, the remote learning is just not doing well, whether or not you're identified is not a factor in whether or not you can get assistance. Is that correct?
Correct. The assistance might look different,
Okay.
but yes.
And I apologize if you said that. I couldn't quite hear everything.
No worries.
Mr. King, I would just add that I would echo your thoughts, and I am a proponent of beginning virtually and remotely and working on some of the things that we need to get done that we have not been convinced could be done to open on time for as far as option or plan number 3 is concerned. We can take a look at it shortly therein and see where we're at, and then certainly upgrade to another phase if necessary. So I would echo Mr. King's feelings on this and would probably vote in that favor.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Laurel and other members of the public. And, I wanted to make sure that before we considered even voting, that we gave an opportunity for people to speak regarding this topic. So that, we've got a bunch of feedback from surveys and so forth, but there's a lot of voices that should be heard. So go ahead, Laurel.
Okay, so the 2 unions.
And let me interject. You're going to need to yell because this is what's picking up for the meet. That's what's picking up for the broadcast, so we have two. So you have to yell for the.
Just speak as loud as you can.
Okay.
All right.
We know you can do it.
So, the two unions presented the school board and the superintendent with a memorandum of agreement, which is basically a long list of safety guidelines we'd like to see put in place. Please keep in mind that not one teacher ever said to themselves, gee, I'd love to teach remotely from my dining room table. One of the things we all agree on is that to teach effectively, we really need to be in classrooms with the kids. Can we teach remotely? Absolutely, but the classroom offers learning experiences such as social, emotional experiences that can't be taught through a computer. The other issue that we all agreed on is the fact that we want both staff and students to be as safe as possible. Many of the safety guidelines that we are asking for are some of the same guidelines that Ruth Ellen has outlined in her reopening plan. That being said, the two unions feel that at this time, the district is not prepared to welcome students back into the building safely. There's been a lot of Facebook chatter saying, why pay the teachers if we go remote and we're teaching our own children? Homeschooling is going to the state and getting a curriculum to teach your child at home. Remote learning is the parent assisting their child with lessons created by teachers that are highly qualified in their field. They will receive face-to-face lessons and teachers will have office hours for questions. The teachers and support professionals feel that until we can safely re-enter this building, the best way to start this year would be to start remotely, reevaluate where the school and community is every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks, health-wise, and gradually add small groups or cohorts of students. If we start remotely and gradually move forward and get an outbreak, we can always move back down to remote teaching until it is safe to move forward again. Safety for all has to come first. Thank you for your understanding and support.
Okay. So I will just state that we did receive that late last night, and
Yes.
we will be back in touch after we've had some review of that. And I don't know if Ruth Ellen had got the answer. I just asked the question when we would have to respond and how would we have to respond based upon that.
There's not a set timetable, but your decision has to be made before impact bargaining happens. So you need to make the decision of what model you're going to go back in with.
Okay.
And then the conversation happens there.
Okay. So anyone else? Please come up.
Hi, I'm Lisa.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lisa Abbott. I'm the president of the para-union. It's not that we don't want to come back. We just want to make sure it's safe to come back. And a lot of the paras that I've talked to have told me that they have underlying conditions, but they're still willing to come back, even with those conditions, as long as the precautions are in place. So I think that if we do the remote for 6 weeks and we make sure that it's safe, I don't think there's going to be a problem with the staff. It's not that they don't want to come back. They do. We think the kids absolutely need to have us there. They do better if there's an adult there to help them.
I'm so sorry, I have to jump in real quick. Mr. Shagman, I know you're in on the phone. Can you do *6 to mute because I'm getting text. We can hear a lot of background on your end. So if you could do *6 to mute and *6 to unmute.
Okay, I'm sitting in a building by myself. Okay.
I know we can hear when you, I'm sorry. So I just got some text asking.
Because there are so many unanswered questions that, like, what happens if the numbers start to go up in New Hampshire, or what happens if someone in the school gets COVID and who's responsible? There are people asking, well, who's responsible for that? Are we going to be held liable if a child catches it? So there are lots of underlying things that we need to make sure we have clear before we actually make a definite decision. Do you know what I'm saying? Does it make sense? It has to be concrete before we can actually just go in and just say, okay, we're going to go in and teach the kids. It isn't that we don't want to. We want to teach the kids. We really do. A lot of the parents are like, we want to go back, but they just want to make sure it's safe. That's the main thing, is being safe. Safety is their concern.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else in the audience? Have we had anybody try to call in?
Have we had any comments?
Just got one follow-up comment.
Go ahead.
I just want to echo that, and I can't speak for the board, but from everything that I've seen in our discussions, the board wants to return to school with the safest possible environment for the staff and our children, while at the same time providing our kids with a sound educational system. I like what Stan said as far as milestones, and I guess part of my discussion or the question I want to put out there is, we may go 6 weeks and our numbers are up and we can't go to a second phase. And the other data set that potentially we have out there is, Rochester chose to go back full time. We're going to be watching Rochester very closely during that 6-week period saying, what's transcribing down there? Are they wearing masks? What's working for them? So we can learn a lot of what one of our neighbors and our other school systems are doing. So I like Stan's concept on our milestones, and I think that's the discussion that we do within the next couple of weeks as we decide what remote looks like. But I think that remote plan or that goal to open up is going to change based on what the data is available to us.
And that's why I didn't say in 6 weeks we're going to do this, because in 6 weeks after school opens on the 9th, we would be potentially making a decision from one extreme to the other. It could be based upon infections in this local area, we're going to stay remote. All I'm saying is that decision, say if we stay remote for 6 weeks, that a decision is made at the 4-week period with notice to what, if anything's going to change.
Yep.
So that the parents and the educators have, not just, we're just going to keep doing this until somebody says something. We need to say a minimum time where we think we need to get everything ready if we were going to bring back a substantial number of kids, whatever ratio, or and then be prepared for that and be able to say 4 weeks in, we are prepared and we have addressed all the issues, and we're in a situation where we feel comfortable bringing kids back.
Your first board meeting, 4 weeks would be October 7th. You have a board meeting October 5th. So is that where you would be looking to make that review?
I was just, my numbers were based upon rough timetables, what makes sense to do right down to the last day. I think needs to be just worked out. I didn't go through the calendar and said, at first I did, and I looked at what would make sense regarding like a holiday, but that wasn't really until Thanksgiving, and I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. So
It more or less falls with that first
Right.
board meeting in October, so that's why I threw that out there.
Yep.
But it may end up being a special meeting to just address that.
So, I mean, I'm ready to make a motion, but I want to make sure that all the board members had opportunity to have any discussion they want. So Joel, Stan, and Josh, feel free to pipe up.
This is Dan again. I just think that rather than having to go back to the board and make a decision, I think we should have in the plan what those benchmarks are, transition from one phase to the other, and when they're met, the plan automatically starts the transition period, whether it's a week or 2 weeks, however long the plan needs to go from fully remote to partially remote, or partially remote to hybrid, or whatever. When that benchmark is met, the plan will already have something in process, so we don't have to make the decision all the time, unless there's some emergency change that needs it. The plan can do all of that for us.
Tim?
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with you, Stan. I don't think that we're prepared to make that decision tonight. But I think I'm comfortable in a vote that we're going to bring the kids back in the first instance in a remote environment and review the data at a future meeting and make decisions based on the data that's available to us. But I like your thought on, what are our data points, what's going to swing us in this direction, and I think that's a second conversation that at least I'm not prepared for and haven't studied enough for tonight.
I agree, but we can make that part of our plan.
Right.
That's what we.
Okay.
So I like that.
Yeah.
We do have 2 questions in the chat area. Would you like me to share them now?
Go ahead.
So one of the staff members wanted just clarification. If we went all remote, will the option to begin remotely still consider allowing special ed students to come back into building for learning as a cohort or schedule? And I believe we addressed this better if Ms. Danito wanted to clear. And the second one is a little similar. It's if a parent or staff member has a concern that their child really struggles with remote learning and they need support, can they also schedule to get some sort of support during that time?
I'm pretty sure that based on what I've heard and what this board would want is yes in both cases. Is that correct, Ruth Ellen?
Thank you.
That's what I heard.
Okay. I think that's what would be at least what I would like to see, and I think that's what also Diana felt that we should be doing. So Josh and Joel, your thoughts?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have no additional thought. I think Stan's a great point. He asked some good questions at the beginning. And, your thoughts, I'm on board with. I think we need to err on the side of caution. We're talking about student safety. It should be the number one concern. And I know it's going to be unpopular with some folks and whatever, but the number one concern is student safety. And this is the safest way to move forward while we're putting some things together to move into a different phase. Public opinion is also important to me, but it's not the number one priority. The number one priority to me is student safety. And if we start school this day, move into a phase 2 and a phase 3, based on information and things that are going on nationwide and statewide, I think this is a smart approach.
Josh?
Yeah, I would just say, I echo what I said before, I'm in favor of a full reopen, whatever it takes to get there. So I understand there might be a delay to get there, whether it be 1 month or 2, what have you.
Okay. Go ahead, Ken.
Just, my last comment in closing, just so the public that's watching realizes, this thing hit us in March. And then the State Department of Education got a committee and a task force going, and those results or those recommendations came to this board in July. And the recommendations that came to us in July, right after the 4th of July, were very, very vague. And there's been a lot of work done in the last month to try to get ready for what we need to do. But I'm not there, and I don't think the board's there on making a decision on bringing back a lot of kids very quickly without studying this. And by going remote, it gives us the 4 weeks we have from now to opening, and potentially another 4 to 6 weeks after that, to make sure that we have the safest plan for our students, we have the safest plan for our staff, and the community's safe. I don't like the decision tonight. I would have went another way. I want the kids back in school, but I'm not ready to say that because we get one shot at this. And that one shot, we better get it right, or somebody can get hurt or killed. And that's the reason for my vote tonight.
The other thing I wanted to add is that the approach going in this year for remote learning is going to be different, and we're looking for a substantially improved result in all cases. And I think when we go remote with all the students initially, it will assist us in getting hopefully very good at it. So if we have a split approach, that we will already have settled into a successful technique remotely. So if we add back the in-person, those people that may stay remote by their own choice will not be suffering. because we will already be hopefully experts at doing our approach by the end of 6 weeks.
Mr. Shagnon started to pipe in.
Go ahead, Joel.
I was just going to echo what Tim said. I think Mr. Brown really summarized it well. This is not, it wouldn't be my first choice, but it's my first choice because we're not equipped well enough yet to go with second or third choice, first or second choice. We're just not there. We cannot roll the dice.
Okay, so I'd make a motion that we open school on the 9th and we remote for 6 weeks. And at the 4-week period, we will notify everyone what, if any, changes will be based upon where we're at for making a phase change or based upon an infection rate being up or down.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Can you repeat the motion?
Motion is to open school on the 9th for the students
Yeah.
and to be remote learning with exceptions, as we discussed before, for 6 weeks. And at the 4-week period, we will notify everyone involved, staff, parents, that if there's going to be a change out of that phase to another.
So, to clarify, is that the second option on the continuum, or are we looking at fully remote and then we're going to discuss the exceptions? Are we looking at option 2 or phase 2 or 1? 1 is fully remote, 2 is remote but with small groups in. I just want to clarify so that people understand more or less where we are.
Well, I don't think you can accomplish phase 1 the way it's worded because you're going to have some students that need to be here. So that doesn't even exist.
Well, phase 1 would be, we're shut down because nobody can be in the building.
No.
Okay. Okay.
I think the building's going to need to be open for staff to do their jobs, and we may need access to the technology, the network, all the tools that they would use in teaching. And as far as any students that need to be here for exceptions, that is on a case-by-case basis, as discussed, because some students are going to need individualized.
They're going to need more.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, my other vision, too, is a lot of what we do is going to be dictated to what the virus throws at us. So while we have 5 phases listed in a draft, during this next
We could end up with 2.5.
period, we could change that and come up with 2 more solutions. But at week 4, we're going to tell the community and staff what that's going to look like. And again, just like we did now, we're more than likely going to take input from the public as well. I mean, we tried to collect a lot of data, try to get a lot of input to make the best decision, and I think that process continues.
Okay. Any other discussion? No.
A teacher posed a question. They just wanted to verify if working remote, and I believe you just answered it, that the teachers will have the option to teach from the classroom if they need the tools from their classroom to do so.
No, that's not part of the motion. That decision will be made later by this board with Ruth Ellen, as far as how that looks as far as remote learning. I mean, that's not part of my motion because that's a whole complete discussion in its own. I mean, all we're making the motion is how it's going to be for the students and the parents and how the start of school is. How we accomplish that, there's a lot of details, and that's not part of this motion.
We ask that everyone commenting or asking a question identify themselves.
Okay,
We can do that.
I'll try to do a better job, Josh.
Mr. Paul, who's a teacher at Valley View, and he just had the question if teachers, even if they're all doing remote, if they could use the classroom if needed.
Thank you.
Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Mr. King.
What's that?
That was from Mr. Shagnon. Question.
Go ahead, Joel.
I just think it's important to know, as members of the community are going to be watching this, that, this board has spent the last week talking to members of the community, getting community input, looking at data, statewide, nationwide. I don't want folks to think that we just kind of made a decision tonight based on whatever information we had, that this was pretty in-depth. And you know, I have to agree with Mr. Brown. I don't necessarily like this decision. I think it's a wise one for us. And we're going to move forward with a phased approach.
Okay, thank you. Did everyone vote?
We need to
No,
vote.
Joel came in with a comment as everyone else
Joel,
was
are
starting
you
to
for or
vote.
against the motion?
I'm for the motion.
And Stan, you are for or opposed?
I'm for.
Josh?
I'm for.
So motion passes unanimously. So I want to thank everybody for their hard work to get to this point. It was, I think, a little bit difficult decision for the board, but I do appreciate their efforts and concerns for the students, the teachers, the paras, and staff. So I think, unless we can start back at the top of the agenda? Yes.
It's your agenda, Mr. King.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
So we'll move back to some less exciting topics. The meeting minutes. We have meeting minutes of July 20th, public session.
And so on the meeting minutes, just so that you're aware, there's one that is sealed from this last time. There's another that was tabled from the July 6th meeting. Both of those are available for discussion if we take those up in non-public. I'll direct the board who is remote where they can find those.
Make a motion that we table the non-public minutes.
All three of them?
Yeah.
So we have a motion to table the non-public, three non-public sessions?
The non-publics or the sealed?
The sealed, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, just the sealed.
The two sealed, okay.
Is there a second? I'll second for discussion. Any discussion? Not hearing any. All in favor to table the non-public sealed minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
So I'll make a motion to approve the public meeting minutes of July 20th and non-public sessions 2 and 3.
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? Not hearing any. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Moving next on our agenda, we have reports. The first one being Treasurer's report. See if I can get my hands on that. Okay. I guess, Ruth Ellen, you have any things that you want to discuss on this or point us to or concerns, or it's...
Not in particular, no. We're getting caught up here with the pieces.
So we're up to May 20th, so we're,
No, this is May of 20.
May
So-
of 20, yeah, May of
So we have the
2020,
reconciliations
so.
for May, we just have June left for the pieces that Mrs. Bork was working on.
Any of the board members have any questions or concerns?
Not on treasurer. I do have a question on the financial.
Okay.
Okay, so if we're all set with that report, move on to financial.
So looking at the financial reports that were submitted, I don't have it in front of me, but I was looking at the revenue. We
Okay.
have some line items within the revenue for, I believe it's the ESSER funding, which is the grant funding that we're getting in for DOE.
Actually, that's under the CARES Act.
Okay. But I thought I saw ESSER, ESER.
Well, it's CARES Act ESSER,
Okay.
yeah.
So we've got plaque holders within our revenue, and I didn't understand the format of the report. Do we have revenue listed there, or is it projected revenue? Because at some point in time, we're going to have to make an action to accept unanticipated revenue, because that wasn't in our revenue projections and anticipated. My second question, and it might be a legal question, the way that they distributed this money, is it included in that additional distribution from the state, where we also have to go to Budget Committee and ask for permission to spend?
My understanding, and I will get it clarified from legal, because it came to us under the entitlement allotment, that it's like our Title I or Title II funding. It's a title allotment. So in that, I don't believe we have to go the extra, but I will double check, and I would much rather have it
Safe than
done
sorry.
safer than sorry. Absolutely.
The difference between last time is, if the budget committee says, no, we can't spend it, then the money goes back. It doesn't reduce the tax rate because it's
Right.
basically grant funding.
Right.
So it's potentially a procedure we have to go through, but I reread the statute, what we did last time, and it's a gray area whether we do or don't, and I'm kind of shocked that nobody else talked about it because of the way it's distributed.
I know I had asked earlier.
Okay.
And the initial was because of the way that it was coming to us, it was like that other. But I will clarify just to make
With-
sure
with
that
counsel.
we're not the other piece. Yep.
And then, have we received any of that money, or are those just placeholders?
Right now, they're placeholders. And we don't have all of that built out yet. Jana had built out part of that for us, and
Okay.
Brian is in the process of getting the rest built out because we're slowly getting pieces encumbered as I'm writing the grant activities, but I don't have the full allotment put in buckets yet.
Okay. All right, I just want to make sure that as that money comes in, we, as a board, we don't miss the requirement that we have to post the public hearing, we have to
Right.
accept it as unanticipated revenue, and kind of move on.
Okay.
So that was the only thing that I saw that I really didn't understand in the financials. I'm good with everything else.
Anybody else with any questions? Okay, moving along, under old business, we have tabled minutes of July 13th, non-public.
And probably, those were tabled back at the last meeting, and we never picked them back up again. So, again, we probably want to put those to non-public for discussion, but
Okay.
I'll make that motion that we review those in non-public.
I'll second. Any discussion? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have snow removal.
So for the snow removal, there had been some
Go ahead.
discussion about our bid process and where we were going with that. We have gone out to our bidder and asked if that would be something that they'd be willing to do for 1 year and then allow us to revisit. Willing to do that. We will have the written benchmarks of all of those pieces in format for the board at our meeting on the 17th. We had a few other details that we were chasing on this piece, but we were at least able to make contact with the bidder. So depending upon where the board wants to go with that.
So in the previous, went out previously to bid. Went out to bid. Were there any other bidders, or this was the only bidder? I don't remember.
No, this was the only bidder.
Only bidder. And was the current vendor for how long? The past? How much history?
Couple years.
How many years is? It's at least since my tenure.
They've been
14
doing
or
it
more.
for 14 consecutive years? Oh, I didn't realize that was long. Go ahead, Tim.
So we do have some history.
Right, okay.
Just as a comment for procedural, I believe at the April 6th meeting, there was a vote taken by the board to reject all bids. So if I'm correct in that, and it didn't change after the April 6th meeting, and I read the minutes tonight, then I think that should come to the board as, we've gone out to bid, it's the only response, do we want to waive our bidding requirements? Because we've already rejected the bid formally, unless we're going to reconsider our rejection of all the bids that was taken on April 6th. I just think it makes it cleaner if we look at it, we know we went out to bid, we know what's out there in the market, and we look at it more of a waiver of bid requirement versus an awarding of a bid that we previously rejected, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it may be to
Keep it clean.
reconsider the decision, waive the bid policy, and consider this existing vendor. So I make a motion to waive the bid policy regarding the snow removal for the 2020 to 21 school year.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'd like to make a motion to,
Was there a no there? I'm sorry.
no. There's only 4, Joel has signed off.
Okay,
He texted me.
okay, thank you. What time was that? Did you get?
7:20.
Thank you.
And then I make a motion to, that was to waive the bid policy, to reconsider the bid from the existing vendor for this year's snow removal.
I think by waiving the bid policy,
Because we rejected all bids,
Right.
so we need to reconsider it. We motioned to reject all bids, so shouldn't we have to?
And you rejected the bid based on the fact that you didn't have 3. So, I mean, you, either way, you've got to either now award it, or
Right, but we can reconsider their bid.
you can. So you're
Yeah.
reconsidering you for 1 year.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm reconsidering that, my motion is to reconsider that bid that was submitted by Cardinal,
Arthur Cardinal.
Arthur Cardinal, for this 1 year, 2020 to 21 year. Do we have a second on the motion?
Would you consider a friendly amendment? Can we reconsider an award so that it's not 2 processes? We can do a motion to reconsider,
Yep,
then we're
I'll
going to go
accept
into
that.
discussion.
Yeah,
I
I'll
would say
accept that.
reconsider an award and keep it clean.
Yeah, I accept that. Is
I'll
there a
second that.
Discussion? Do we have that amount for the record?
Oh,
80,000.
No.
no, it wasn't that much. I'll have to go back to it. We
Yeah.
pay by the storm, so
Okay.
it's an hourly per storm rate.
Okay, so I guess we don't have a total to add to the record.
I will go back and grab that I mean,
Well, no,
it won't be a total bid
It's
because it
based
depends on how
upon
much
the
it snows.
previous bid submitted.
Yes.
Any discussion on that? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have construction at risk.
Well, do we want to do the bid waiver for the Chromebooks while we're doing bid waivers? Up to you.
You're gonna have to do some presentation, so go ahead.
I am, okay. As we prepare for remote learning, we are going to need, we've been looking to try to get Chromebooks, so we're in a one-to-one situation for the entire district. We are on a list, but I need to reconfirm or confirm an order if we're going to do that, so that we can move forward. I do have a quote from Trinity, who has been a preferred vendor for us and is able to get our Chromebooks in. We're looking at 120 touchscreen devices and 230 regular Chromebooks. With that, we will be able to have a device for every student K-12. The totals on that, it's $365 per device for the touchscreens. It's $279 per device for the regular Chromebooks. That includes warranties and, grab mine.
The warranty a standard warranty, or is it an additional cost warranty?
Yeah, I can jump in. That includes a 4-year extended warranty that includes accidental damage, includes theft and loss recovery, includes repairs and replacement.
Do we know what the cost of that is? Per device, ballpark?
It's included in that $279 price.
So we don't know what the price is if we went.
Well, if I look at it here, it's this much and then includes this. So I don't have it broken out separately.
The only reason I'm asking that is Oyster River, when they did their one-to-one, looked at those costs and found it cheaper to buy additional units and to buy like a ruggedized case for the Chromebooks versus buying the warranty. So, I mean, we can talk about waiving the bid requirements, but I'd like to see when that purchasing decision is made, kind of compare both to see what's in the better interest of the district.
Okay.
Particularly with, handing these to young kids, we want to make sure that, that protective packaging is going to help them more than the full warranty. And is the full warranty a full warranty, or is there postage? Is there a $100 deductible?
No limit on claims, free shipping both ways, no deductible, hardware fail, will send parts for repair if desired, advance exchange, theft and loss, secure technician online portal, 3-year battery coverage with replacement, zero cost of ownership.
And that may be an awesome package, but I just kind of want to
What
look at
we've
the
looked
price.
at in the past, and we can certainly double check it, is with the volume, while 350 Chromebooks or 350 devices looks like a lot for us, it's not a huge order as huge orders go. Oyster River's volume is certainly going to be different than ours. And so as we look at that piece, this ends up being, I believe, a better deal, but we'll double check that and we'll get some numbers. Yep.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I don't know if that's, would make sense for us. But, because if we do that, then some of that warranty and repair has to come on us, and whether or not that's gonna be a burden that we can handle easily, or, but go ahead.
How do we pay for it?
That's the big question. Where does it come from?
This would come out of the CARES grant, the ESSER grant.
Is that fully funded, or is it?
It is fully funded, and it is a pre-approved activity. So this would be approved for us to do now.
And what is the total of that grant?
The total of the grant, or the total of
The grant.
this? The grant is $362,000.
So if the total is 362, and if we agree, if we motion this, we're gonna lose 107. So that puts 255,000 left in it, or are there other things that are slated to go in here, and what are those? And
So other things that would be slated to go in, hotspots for students for remote learning.
do we have estimated number on that?
We have an estimated number, and I have ballparked, if we need to do them all, it may be up to 40,000 for the year. We did not use as many in the spring as we had anticipated.
How many
in
did we
part-
purchase in the spring?
We had purchased, help me out, Jen, we had both Kajits and Verizons because we need, part of the district covers AT&T, part of the district is Verizon, and sometimes they don't work in other parts of the district. So we had two different companies going.
We 35 Verizon and 15 Kajit, and part of that cost that she's talking about is the monthly cost to keep the Verizon going. We can suspend them when we don't need to use them, which I've already done, except for those for summer school. But to keep, if we kept all 35 Verizon going, and I suspended the Kajit at this time, but if we would keep them all going, that's what she's coming up with the cost for a monthly service.
So the manifest that I signed the last meeting, it was showing a Verizon bill of $1,400 per month. Is that for all of our Verizon hotspots, or is that a fee that once they're shut off, we've got to continually pay that?
No, that's, if they're shut off, we're not paying that fee while they're shut off.
So was that $1,400 fee for hotspots that weren't shut off yet?
That was for what we were using during remote learning.
And those were older bills that I was looking at. So
Right, oh.
even though I signed them the last meeting, it was for the service period the month before while school was in session, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So 1,400, Jen, how many Verizon modems do we have?
35?
We have 35.
So we're paying about $40 a month per Verizon modem. What are we paying on AT&T?
For AT&T, what we did, and I'll pull up the pricing again, but we paid for a specific time period with them. At the time, we were just waiting on the Verizon ones, and really those are the families who Verizon doesn't show up. So I'll pull up the pricing for you and get that to you, but for a 4-month contract and not month by month, because they have that flexibility to do that.
Okay, because we've also had a couple of towers go up online with AT&T, so I think we want to check.
We may have better coverage
We
now.
may have better coverage, and we may want to check the pricing between the two, because certainly on a corporate account, an unlimited high-speed FirstNet modem, because we're a FirstNet agency, is going to be $40 a month, but if we don't need that unlimited data, we're going to be paying a lot less on a AT&T corporate account. So
Correct.
I get no, I get,
AT&T was less because it was not unlimited data, so you're correct there. On
Okay.
the Verizon are unlimited. They work wonderfully for our high school students, middle school, and staff. Where the Khajiit work better for the students in the younger grades, and it's not unlimited, so it was less.
yeah. So
I'll look up the prices for you.
Yep, I don't have a problem with the modems. I think we need them. I think we have to spend them. Hopefully, that's the federal money that we're going to spend. But I just want to
And that is where it is
the most
slated.
bang for my buck. Second comment I have on the laptops, and I'm getting nervous going into our opening. I'm hearing rumors out in the federal legislature of, hey, there's more money coming, but we don't know what, if anything, that's going to be. And I'm looking at a lot of expenses. So I'll put this out there for a theory, and I don't know whether it can be done with this grant funding. Have we looked at, on the $107,000 in Chromebooks or thereabouts, have we looked at, is it more fiscally responsible to do a lease and tie that over a couple of years versus paying cash now if we need that other money to put in place our safety measures that we might have to put in place? Such as,
We can look at the price.
Okay.
We can look at the price.
But what happens in subsequent years? If we take that approach and say we do a 4-year lease, and on $107,000, it's going to be $30,000 per year on a 4-year lease, what are we going to do in follow-on years when we don't have that federal money?
I think we've got two options, and I'd ask you a question with a question, and what do we do if we need plexiglass this year and we don't have the money? And that's $60,000. So I think, and again, before I'd say yes to a lease, I would look at a lease with no prepayment penalty so that hopefully we can pay out that lease this year, but if we need $80,000 to make our schools safe, we can kind of juggle and rob from Peter to pay Paul.
We'll have to look to see, too, what that's going to look like, because
Well, maybe we can get a
Can you
little
get
deeper in
things
this
in?
discussion, because
Okay.
at 362, it's 362,000, we take off 107, say if we need, you're proposing potentially max is 40,000 for hotspots. I think that's probably unrealistic. I don't think we're going to be there, but say we're 15 minimum, that could be down to 240K. What other large items are slated in that?
we have looked at additional electrostatic sprayers for the custodians, and that could either go in the CARES grant or in the HSEM grant, but that one is 75% reimbursable. It's not 100%.
And a rough estimate?
Those run about 600 apiece.
545.
Okay.
But how many units?
We have,
so that's-
I'm looking at,
it's a few
we
thousand.
really need, as many as 12 if we can, so that we've got one for each of the custodians, if they're going to need to be really
Okay.
getting things clean.
So now you're up to $6,000.
Yeah.
So that's,
Looking at if we need to do the dividers, I've gotten prices, the plexiglass dividers, I've gotten prices anywhere from $28 to $71 per desk. The ones that are lower cost have a border around them, so you are going to have some kids that are going to be doing this. And not all of them can be cleaned down with chemicals. They can only be done with soap and water, which is longer timing on cleaning.
the
Rough
other thing
estimate
is
on
size and fit. because
size
you
and
gotta-
fit and
you
where
gotta
we're
fit
looking.
our desk or whatever space.
So we're looking at somewhere between probably $40,000 and $70,000, depending upon what we have to do as far as customizing for science labs, for computer labs, that sort of thing.
So that gets you down to say 170. So what other large ticket items? I mean, because right now, I mean, this gets, boiling it down, maybe we're gonna answer that lease versus purchase, because if we still have potentially 170K reserved in that, and we're still gonna have some fall expenses, but if you haven't got them in the queue,
Right.
and we've talked about a lot of things, I mean, there may be some additional things we need to do.
And there may be some additional pieces of the technology that we need to put in there for, microphones,
learning, yeah.
for remote learning, that sort of thing.
I would also caution that we really need all these Chromebooks, and if we're coming up to a school year where demand for Chromebooks is very high, you might want to get our order in so we're in queue.
Right.
To get a Chromebook before they run out.
We're in a queue with pending approval now. Yep. Looking at what else I have in the ESSER as more or less placeholders right now. We have the shields, we have cleaning supplies and the solution for the sprayers, for additional masks and gloves. I'm ballparking up to an additional $15,000 depending on what we're gonna need. We're gonna need gowns for nurses. We're gonna need N95 masks for nurses.
Some of that is going to be able to be provided to us free of charge from the federals?
We've gotten some masks.
State has some now.
We've gotten some, and I will tell you that about every second one we pull out of the box breaks. But we've been stapling them together. Go ahead.
The order I just put in with the state, I did put in for some N95 masks that said that they're available, but I'll find more masks.
Okay. So Mr. Gordon indicated that we've put in an order for N95s with the state. We'll see if we can get those next week.
But the nurses' universal precautions, we'll call them, is it the full respirator mask with the canisters on there? If we looked at what they need for the higher level in an actual exposure and to cost those out, because some of those respirator masks, they've got to be personally fit,
Right. They have to be fitted.
and B, they're expensive.
And training, right. Right. One of the things that we do have access to for this too, the state has given us their state contract codes so that we are able to get the state's pricing on these, which does put us in a much better position.
So is it fair to say you have at least $100,000 in the bank that
Yes.
Yes.
isn't earmarked? Okay, so then I'm okay without the lease. And I'm also, I'm
Go ahead.
okay with a cash purchase out of the
Okay.
ESSER funding versus a lease.
So I guess I'll make a motion to waive the bid requirement for the Chromebooks and select Trinity for the purchase. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now I'll make a motion to authorize Ruth Ellen to purchase those with the caveat that before it's finalized, that she furnish back to us the differential cost of the additional hardening of the cases with spares versus the warranty that is
Okay.
quoted. So basically, the motion is to put those on order, get the pricing alternative for us to
Okay.
consider at the next meeting.
Okay.
I guess my only question would be, dealing with grants in the past, we buy these now, take them out of our cash flow to pay for them, is the grant going to allow that as, before we have the check in place?
This is the one area where we have been allowed to expend, we've been able to cover back into, and because this is it's an already preloaded activity. They knew that districts across the state were going to need this.
Okay.
This is a pre-approved, yes, we're good to go.
Okay, I got no issues.
Not, most grants we don't have anywhere near this latitude on,
Yeah.
but there's like those 5 things they said, we know you're going to need them, do.
Okay,
So is there a second on the motion?
I think I seconded it.
Okay, second.
Yes, you did.
Any discussion? Not hearing any discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, getting back to construction at risk.
So you have in your packet, you had asked me to go back to companies to ask for a rough order of magnitude. We did hear back from North Branch on that, and then we heard back from Structure Tone. And they gave us, one was a little bit more specific, rough order of magnitude than the other. North Branch came in at 100,000, roughly. Structure Tone has given us a little bit more specific as far as where that would go with some options, and one of the options I wasn't necessarily looking to do anyway. If you look at the drawing that is in your packet, the dividing of these reception area at Henry Wilson to provide a back conference room is something that we don't have to do first. And that would eliminate cutting through a masonry wall to put in a second doorway, and also eliminate a second wall that would need to be created with a secure door. So that would take off some pricing there. Also looking at creating that airlock and reconfiguring the other offices that would, there's some savings there with a second option that dropped the overall price from the 80s down into the lower 70s.
So do you have a recommendation?
Recommendation would be to go with Structure Tone.
But that cost, estimated cost is 80,000. You think it may be 10,000 less.
Right, with the
And that's for
two
one
optional
school.
pieces would be taken off.
That's for one school.
That's for Henry Wilson. This does not include the other two buildings. We're in the process of getting some pieces. You're gonna come to a mic and yell?
Yes,
And then you gotta speak up so it catches you here too.
the representative from Structure Tone came in last week to look at this school and Valley View, and hopes to have the estimates back for that within the next week. Those are simpler things of just putting basically windows in and putting mag locks on the interior doors.
So if they're gonna have that next week, wouldn't it make sense to
Hopefully next week.
wait till we have that so we can see how we're gonna, if we're gonna go with this firm to do this, and how we're gonna be able to pay for it? Because right now,
Well, the 100,000 from North Branch, they didn't specify whether that was for the three schools or not, because they never looked at these two schools.
right.
Well, so then that would have been just for Henry Wilson
Yes.
because they didn't
Right.
look at the other two.
So, I mean, I think that they kind of responded like they weren't interested,
Yeah.
with the way they priced it. So I was thinking if, say if this was the only one that was interested in doing it, I'd like to see the estimates on the other two schools to make sure that it makes sense, because I think we only had, it was 130,000 total to do everything.
And then the board
Each part
also,
allocated to each school.
right, but then the board also encumbered an additional 50,000 from last year's funds to augment. So that gives us a little bit more latitude. It goes quickly in a construction project.
Yeah, I mean, that's my thoughts. I mean, I'll open a discussion of boards, and then they'd be maybe a little bit more interested to say, the board wants to see other quotes to make sure we've got it before they make a decision on the first one. And then they'll get it in, and we can kind of say, does this make sense? Are we ready to go?
I just don't see, I see needs at three schools. This is, the Henry Wilson is our worst school. I don't see that $70,000 price going down.
No, I don't think it's going to go down.
Right.
But if I was quantifying the total and saying, yes, we have the monies for this, and at the same time going to the vendor and say, maybe they submitted a timeline, and say, okay, now if we're gonna award you these three bids at these prices, what's gonna be your time schedule, and to make sure that's gonna work with what we need to work around with.
Or do we want to look at it as
And
three
get a commitment
separate?
from them to make sure they stay on track. So that's one other reason I don't want to, I mean, I don't know what they submitted in the, I didn't get a chance to review this enough to know what they put in for a time and estimate, so forth.
They didn't really have.
Right.
It wasn't in there.
But I think for me to award this, we got to make sure it's going to work for us schedule-wise and cost-wise. And I'd like to see them come in with those other two bids. And when they come in with the bids, say the board also wanted to know, what is your realistic time frame to get this done? Because we may have to work around it, and that may be okay, but we can't just, because I don't want to say, you got to have it done by this date.
Well, we do, if we don't have things done by December, we lose the grant funding.
Right. So there's situations where there's money and there's time, and they got to commit to what they can do, and it's got to work for us. So I'd like to see kind of the whole package from them, and you can put it forth, says, okay, these are our deadlines, and what works, because you guys have some things, time frame that you prefer, it's got to work around. And like in this project, it may be the biggest one and need to get done first,
But
and
this-
in a time when we're shut down.
But this is certainly the bigger of the three projects. I guess my other question would be, does it make sense to award them as three separate pieces so that one could potentially get started while we wait for the specifics on the other two? Again, that's the board's decision.
That's just my discussion. I'll open the rest of the board.
I don't necessarily like doing it at three separate projects because 70,000 may be a profitable project, and then the other two are minor projects that really aren't worth their time and effort, so they do the big one and don't bother doing the other two. I think we can, we've got two companies in here that are giving us prices. I think we can authorize them to negotiate with one of the two companies, and willing to go with Larry's recommendation, so that we're not going back and forth between two companies, but we're authorizing Larry, go ahead and enter into negotiations and bring back these questions that we have answered so that the process gets started. And that might even speed up getting the other two prices.
I didn't see the need to go back out to the other vendor because I don't think the other vendor's serious.
Right.
I think this is the only serious vendor in the package.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of them finishing up the other sides, proposing what the total package is, giving us dates that are going to work for us, and the board making a decision on it. I don't see any more involved in that. I don't need to see another bid from the other vendor because they weren't competitive on this, and they didn't really want to, they were just like, here's a number. I mean, but these people could come back, and they could also give us a date that's not acceptable to us. So if there's no date here that's going to work for us, maybe they gave you some inclination.
Well, they're waiting to hear one way, but yeah, I can reach out to him tomorrow, contact him and say, this is what we need.
At this rate, we are tentatively scheduled for a meeting next Monday.
We are,
So
yes.
they can, as soon as, I mean, at this point, for me, I'd be waiting on them.
So do we want to just table this until Monday?
I want to hear from the rest of the board. Joel, me and Stan and Josh, your thoughts?
Fine.
Josh still with us?
Yes, he is.
Josh?
He's good.
Okay.
I'll make a motion, we table till next Monday.
We intend to get the additional information and make a full decision?
Yeah, just let them know on the phone, we're ready to go Monday.
Yep.
And then just, we got to have the full cost and the timing. You know, and that timing has to be what works sense for you guys. I'm not going to say a requirement it's got to be done by first day of school, because that may not be where the priorities need to be.
Well, we don't know what that's going to be.
First day of school is the 9th. It just doesn't
Right.
mean it's in person.
Right.
But we don't know whether it's not doable on the first day of school.
Right.
So I'll second that motion to table. Any discussion? Not hearing any. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Larry. Next, on the new business, Ruth Ellen, you had a couple things?
I do as well.
Yes. We're in the process of getting our phone systems installed, and one of the issues that we've run into here at the high school, the PA system, the our notification system here is original to the building. It is a Duquesne system that is obsolete and has been obsolete for several years now. They are needing to tie in the phones to that because we will have the ability to page with phones from classrooms. If there's an emergency, we can do an all-call from anywhere. But for them to tie into that system, we have a system that it's on life support now. If they can upgrade using a good chunk of what's already there and get it upgraded to a Bogan system for us, that pricing would be $2,600, which includes mostly labor and some parts to get that done. While they can patch into what we have, it's certainly not best to put a brand new system tied to something that is dying and will likely need to be changed out soon. But that is a board decision, as it does exceed what has already been authorized.
So what was the total cost of the phone system or the system that they're upgrading here?
One is, for the 3 schools, it was roughly $30,000 all told, and then the ongoing costs were going to be considerably less. I want to say it was
6,000.
36?
$6,000 on the
Six
ongoing.
for the ongoing, yes.
So the install for this building, say approximately 10,000,
Thereabouts.
and the replacement of the PA system is additional 25%.
Correct.
My only recollection, and I don't have the bid in front of us, but there was a bid spec that put out at the time that this contract went that included the PA system and the tying the PA system into the phone. I don't recall what the specs were in that, but I don't want to award another $2,800 if they're on the hook to do it based on that contract that we awarded.
That was to tie into the existing system.
Yep.
And now they're seeing the existing system is further gone than we had estimated at the beginning. So again,
Did we
No
have
longer supported?
it is no longer
Did we
supported.
have a walkthrough? Did we have a walkthrough at the time?
Yes. I don't know that they took it all apart, but they did. And
I got no problem with authorizing, and I can do this in a motion, but I'm putting it up for discussion, authorize your business administrator to negotiate with them. I don't want to pay the $2,800 if they're on the hook with a contract to make that work. I'll meet them halfway.
I mean, the other point is,
I mean,
the 2,600 is for the new system. They still had a fixed cost for tying into the old system, and whatever that fixed cost should be subtracted from the 2,600. You know what I mean? Because 2,600 is a full system. If they had estimated $700, it was going to cost them to tie in an existing system, that price should be less, that $600 or $700 or whatever. So I agree
and
with
I
that.
don't know that it isn't
Right.
already, but I will check that.
so what is,
So I'll make a motion to authorize the business administrator to up to $2,600 for this required upgrade, but to do his best to bring the cost down to what it really should be.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 So, yeah,
Okay.
clear on that, Ruth Ellen?
I am.
Okay.
Thank you.
See what he can do.
Okay.
It's a test. Tell Brian it's a test.
And then I had one other piece.
Go ahead.
As we are looking at next year, and we don't know exactly where things are going to fall, and Governor Wentworth is not making their determination about their model until tomorrow night. But we do know that if we are back in person, that our transportation is going to be stretched if we have restrictions. I would like to propose a change in our policy that would allow students to self-transport to VOC if necessary. If we can provide transportation, I would certainly love to be able to do that. I'm just not sure how many directions we're going to be pulled, particularly as I'm currently down a bus driver.
What does Governor Wentworth say on that?
Actually, they called us and said, is that something you're considering? We think,
Okay.
They're checking with other districts just to make sure that it's on their radar because they know that we're tight. And they also need to be able to save parking if our students are going to be driving.
So why wasn't this in the current policy, this option. I guess there must have been concern of why we wouldn't allow vocational students to self-transport. So I guess what was the original concern which kept it out of the policy that we should consider in this case?
In the past, it's the liability issue, and I would certainly want to make sure that we have parental permission signed in order for students to transport themselves.
Do we need a waiver of liability? From the student and parent?
I would say yes. And there have been times when there has been a case-by-case basis that has been granted even in the interim because of a scheduling conflict, because of, if a student worked in Wolfboro, rather than to drive a bus back here and then turn on and drive back up again, could that be allowed if they were doing internships elsewhere?
So is Lakes Region and Governor Wentworth two separate entities? Because I know Governor Wentworth is making a decision tomorrow.
Lakes Region is the vocational center that is run by Governor Wentworth. Yes.
Because I listened to the superintendent's public presentation in Wolfboro, which was pretty outstanding. And that was last night I listened to it, and I was under the understanding that there hasn't been a decision on Lakes Region as of yet, is what
I don't believe they haven't made a decision for Governor Wentworth
as well.
either.
But I didn't know whether those decisions are going to be simultaneous, so we don't really know.
I don't know exactly what it will look like, and it may not be a decision that has to come tonight, but I think it needs to be on the radar as we get closer and know what they're looking at. If they're looking at remote, it may be a moot point for the first 6 weeks. But I think it's something we may need to at least explore and see how many students are going to be impacted by that.
Yeah, I would be in favor of changing the policy, and I'll make a motion right now that we change the policy to allow students to self-transport with written parental permission and a waiver liability, a signed waiver liability drafted by council.
I'll second for discussion and put out my concern.
Go ahead.
If we have a student who basically comes to the high school, they're in school, and we allow them to transport out, I'd like to hear Primex's take on that, only because they're the
So would
ones
you
that are-
like Primex to review the waiver of liability rather than?
Yep.
Or Primex might say no way.
They might say no way, and that's fine. I'll accept a friendly amendment if it's not
If it's
deemed acceptable by our insurance company, then it
Okay.
doesn't put in place.
Or a motion to allow it, provided it's acceptable by
Yeah.
Primex.
Yep, I accept that.
And I'll renew my second.
Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
But
Thank you, Stan. Thanks, Josh.
Okay.
Anything else in the new business, Ruth Ellen?
That's all I had.
Tim had one.
I do.
Okay.
Looking over the manifest, and we talked a little bit earlier tonight about the Verizon modems. I signed 2 manifests for $1,400 a month. Kind of like to look at that to see if it's hit the $5,000 mark. If it is, then this board's going to have to do a waiver of bid.
Okay.
I'm seeing that happen a couple times, and Brian's new, and I know he needs the time to kind of get caught up. But I guess my concern on my request would be, when he gets caught up, can he look at our accounts payable for the last fiscal year, and the total amount of money went out, and identify any contracts that are over $5,000 that we don't have either a bid or a waiver of bid for, so that we're in compliance with our auditing procedure?
Okay. And keep in mind too that if it's something new, we would need that. If it's been something that's been ongoing, that is part of budgeted and accepted, that hasn't been the case.
Well, we have to either have a current bid, which I'm assuming we have a contract with legal. We pay $80,000 a year with legal, so we've got a contract. So that contract's been approved.
Okay,
At some point in
that's
time, we either
interesting, yeah.
went out to bid with them or waived
Right,
bid
we
or
did.
whatever.
Yep.
So I think we need to look at when we contracted, and I'll use legal for an example, when we contracted with legal, what's the contract for it? Are we supposed to be, is it a set term? Are we supposed to be renewing this every year? That's kind of where and being new to the board, I don't see and I haven't seen these, but that's kind of a checks and balances that I think we should be looking at.
You're referring to, like, say, outside services, like legal, maybe
I mean, it might even be,
some maintenance issue, landscaping, I don't know.
it could be,
And typically, those things that are cost out on an hourly basis have run, okay, we're accepting this until such time the board says it's time for a change. And jump in, Stan, because you've been on the board longer too. It was, I want to say they went out to bid the end of my first year here. And for legal, to use that as the example. And it was awarded to Soul Kidder.
And how many years ago was that?
That would have been in 17, moving into 17, 18.
but is it typically to do a contract, kind of an open-ended contract? I mean,
There's not a self-renew clause, it's just an open-ended contract until...
It's just open-ended until it's kind of a mutual,
changed.
and so that could certainly be revisited.
yeah, and I don't want to weigh Brian down, because I know he's trying to learn the system and whatever. But as he gets to that point where he's ready and he's got some time, I'd really I'd really like to look at that, because
Okay.
I don't think we should have forever contracts.
Understood.
I think in a contract we can say, you know, the parties agree to auto renew at the end of this year, or if notice isn't given, it can auto renew, or something similar to that effect. And that may be in the contract. I don't know, but I'd like to look at those.
I would be curious to see how that is structurally written on the legal contract, to see if we're kind of auto-renewed into a time, or it's open-ended till, I mean, you might want to drop it in our folder so I can look at it.
Okay, I'll have to
You
go
know,
back
what
and find
that
All right.
format is. I've done a few on the town side, and I think that it's been both ways. I think we've kind of done it on an annual basis in some cases, or it's just been in perpetuity until a change. And it may depend on the firm and how they work, because some firms may want different contract language than others.
I know we went out to bid for auditors. It was awarded to Plodzik.
But that probably was for a term, wasn't it?
Well, I don't believe it was a specified 3-year or 5-year term.
Because on the town side it is.
Okay, and I will go back and double
It's 3
check.
years, and I don't know that I've ever seen that the school side, but I think, I think when we're looking at some of these contracts, for me, where I'm kind of going with it is I'm looking for consistency. So that all of a sudden, we know, okay, these contracts are going to come up in 3 years.
This is the cycle.
Yeah. Similar to the snow plowing, because I happen to be sitting doing something and saying, hey, we're coming up in August, have we awarded snow plowing? I think we didn't fill, and that's
Right. So it doesn't get dropped.
So I'm looking for kind of tickers and maybe a spreadsheet, because Jana did this at one time with one of the projects, that says, okay, legal's up on this particular year. Snow plowing is annual. Landscaping is this. And even some of our supply lines, because I imagine that Larry's spending a lot of money on chemicals now and supplies, and is that something that, we've got to look at in waiver? What are those dollar numbers that we're spending? And that's kind of why I'm looking at Brian to look at, what did we do last year? Is there any red flags that we can fix so we don't get hit on an audit? And then look
Or
at,
potentially the other areas we could maybe look for some improvement, cost-wise.
And we want to look too, right now, our bid threshold is $5,000. But if you look at our procurement policy, there's different levels of that far exceed the $5,000. So
Probably at Staples or wherever. WB Mason.
So we want to look to see there's some potential discrepancies there
Right,
because those may need to be
your
put back in
monthly
alignment.
purchasing of disposable items probably conflicts with that bid policy.
And so how do we, and because that falls
And
more under procurement, because it's not necessarily bid, so.
Is that addressed?
Let's get it clarified.
Yeah, it's not clear now?
I think it is, but if you're looking at, one is a bid if you're looking at a service, and it's a one-time contract. If it's a renewable where we're going out for paper, we spend more than $5,000 in paper. And we've been fortunate enough to also be able to use the state contract on most of that procurement. So we know we're getting better prices, but how do we, because the procurement threshold is very high. It's in the hundreds of thousands. But I want to make sure that there's an understanding between the two.
So when we did our rework of our policies, started with the prior board, there was a bunch of policies that were done, there was a bunch that were revoked. I remember reviewing a bidding policy, but I don't remember reviewing a procurement.
The procurement policies were done as part of getting a whole host of things back in line that we needed to do for
But is there
for
a
the audit.
procurement policy up online?
Yes, there is. Yep. It's under the Ds.
Okay,
So,
I'll look at that.
okay.
Anything else for new business? I thought I had one, but I can't remember. Stan or Josh, anything for new business?
No?
Okay, so we have some non-public, Ruth Ellen?
We do.
Okay, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and I'm going to wish you a good night and make a motion to go on non-public session under RSA 91A32.
Nominations and resignations.
Nomination resignations. We already took care of the student issues, so.
We did.
All those in favor? I think I had a third sheet that was missing.
Whether or not we served in uniform, are veterans of a war in which freedom and free government are at stake. Our victory, won at staggering cost, will not be consolidated until we and our children